Nobody tells you about the smell. Former astronauts who have returned from spacewalks describe it consistently and with a precision that surprises people. Space smells like burnt metal. Like welding. Like the inside of a machine that has been running too hot. When the airlock repressurizes and the helmet comes off, there is a moment, brief, specific, almost industrial, where the vacuum of space announces itself through the olfactory system before it disappears entirely. It is not the scent of wonder. It is the scent of hostile chemistry. Nobody tells you that the silence outside is not the comforting silence of a quiet room. It is the silence of total acoustic annihilation. In a vacuum, there is no medium for sound to move through. If the spacecraft structure around you were to crack, if metal were to fatigue and fracture, you would feel the vibration before you heard anything, and depending on where you were positioned, you might not hear it at all. The universe outside the hull is not quiet in the way that implies peace. It is quiet in the way that implies absence. Nobody tells you about the light. The photographs of Earth from space are calibrated, processed, optimized for human perception. What astronauts actually see when they look back at Earth from deep space, when the planet is far enough away to fit inside their field of vision, is a brightness against black so extreme that the contrast is almost painful. And then you turn away from the sunlit side, and the dark is so complete, so total, so entirely without gradation or boundary that the human visual system, which evolved for a world of ambient light and scattered photons, has nothing to process. The darkness is not dark. It is an absence so fundamental it feels like a pressure. This is what going to the moon on Artemis II will actually feel like. Not the edited version. Not the official imagery. The physical, sensory, visceral reality of traveling 250,000 miles from Earth in a pressurized aluminum and composite capsule, surrounded by a universe that is entirely indifferent to whether you arrive. If you want the real thing, not the press release, not the highlight reel, stay here. Because what follows gets more precise, and more extraordinary, and considerably harder to look away from. Launch day begins long before the rocket ignites. The crew wakes in crew quarters at Kennedy Space Center before dawn, having slept, or tried to sleep, in a facility that is designed for every operational requirement except the psychological reality of what the next 12 hours contain. They eat a meal. They are examined by flight surgeons who check blood pressure and heart rate and the dozens of baseline measurements that will be compared against the same numbers taken on the far side of the moon. They suit up in the Orion pressure suits, a process that takes over an hour, that involves technicians carefully checking every seal and connector and zipper because the suit is, in the most literal sense, the boundary between the crew member's body and the void. The drive to the launch pad in the Artemis crew transport vehicle takes about 40 minutes. The crew is seated in a vehicle that was built to feel ceremonial and functional simultaneously, the last comfortable drive any of them will take for 10 days. Outside the windows, the Florida landscape moves past in the gray pre-dawn, palmetto scrub, still water, birds beginning to move. The ordinary world doing its ordinary things, indifferent to what is about to happen at the end of the road. The Space Launch System, the rocket that will carry them, is 4 times taller than a 10-story building. Up close, it does not look like a vehicle. It looks like architecture. It looks like a structure that belongs to the ground. The crew rides the elevator up the launch tower, walks the access arm, and climbs into the Orion capsule at the top. The hatch closes. The world outside is now mediated entirely through instruments and a small porthole window. And then there is nothing to do but wait for the countdown. Liftoff is not subtle. The Space Launch System produces roughly 8.8 million pounds of thrust at launch, a figure that has no meaningful human analogy. The sensation inside the capsule is not the smooth surge of an aircraft accelerating down a runway. It is percussive. The vehicle shakes with a violence that is felt in the chest cavity, in the teeth, in the inner ear. The noise, even through the suit helmet, even through the acoustic insulation of the capsule walls, is physically present. The crew is not riding the rocket so much as being contained by it while it does something enormous. The ascent to orbit takes approximately 8 minutes. In those 8 minutes, the crew goes from 0 to roughly 28,000 kilometers per hour. The acceleration loads build and then ease as stages separate, then build again. At maximum dynamic pressure, the point of peak atmospheric stress on the vehicle, the shaking intensifies before the air thins enough to relieve it. The sky outside the porthole transitions from blue to dark blue to a black that arrives with a finality that no description quite prepares you for. 8 minutes. Then the main engines cut off. And in the silence that follows, a silence that is physically different from any silence on Earth, because it is accompanied by the sudden absence of gravity, the crew floats gently against their restraints, and the planet they just left is visible through the window, curving away below them, already beginning to look small. But this is not the moon yet. This is only orbit. The deep burn that sends Orion toward the moon comes hours later, and when it fires, the sensation is different, a long, steady push that lasts minutes, that sends the vehicle onto a trajectory it cannot easily reverse, that commits the mission in a way that launch itself does not. Launch can be aborted. The translunar injection burn, once completed, is a one-way door. The transit to the moon takes approximately 3 days. 3 days in a capsule smaller than a mid-size apartment's living room, with 4 people, in microgravity, watching the Earth shrink from a world that fills the porthole to a bright disk to a marble to a point of light among other points of light. Astronauts who have traveled this distance describe the shift as visceral and sudden, the moment when the psychological reality of where you are catches up to the factual reality. When Earth is no longer a place you can see in any human detail. When it becomes, instead, an object. The body in microgravity is simultaneously more capable and more fragile than it is on the ground. Fluids redistribute toward the head, creating a constant sensation of nasal congestion, a subtle pressure behind the eyes. The spine decompresses slightly as gravity stops compressing it, which means the crew will be fractionally taller upon return than they were at launch. The vestibular system, the inner ear's mechanism for understanding orientation, receives no useful gravity signal and must be constantly reconciled with visual input, which creates a disorientation that most people adapt to within a few days but which never entirely resolves. And all the while, the radiation that Apollo astronauts could not measure is accumulating. The dosimeters on the suits are recording it. The particles are moving through the capsule walls, through the seats, through the bodies of the crew. Not in a way that will cause immediate symptoms. Not in a way that registers in any felt sense. But in a way that is real, and measurable, and incrementally consequential. The beauty of the view, if anything, makes the radiation harder to process. Because the view is extraordinary. The moon grows from a distant crescent to a world with visible craters and Maria and the specific, ancient topography of something that has been struck by the full violence of the early solar system for 4 billion years. At closest approach, it fills the window the way Earth filled it at the beginning of the journey, except that where Earth was blue and white and alive with motion, the moon is gray and still and silent with a silence that seems to extend in every direction without limit. The free return trajectory of Artemis II does not include a landing. The crew will loop around the moon at a distance closer than any human beings have come since Apollo 17, look down at the south polar region that future missions will attempt to walk on, and then fire the engine that sends them home. That moment, engine ignition on the far side of the moon, out of contact with Earth, in the radio shadow of another world, is one of the most psychologically concentrated moments in the entire mission. The communications blackout during the lunar flyby is brief but total. Mission control cannot hear the crew. The crew cannot hear mission control. They are, for those minutes, further from any other human being than anyone alive on Earth. The engine either fires or it doesn't. If it doesn't, the contingency options are limited, and the crew knows exactly what limited means. The engine fires. The capsule comes around the limb of the moon. The antenna finds Earth. The signal returns. And the voices of the flight controllers, after the silence, carry something that no amount of professionalism can fully flatten, the specific relief of knowing that the people who went around the moon are coming back. Re-entry and splashdown close the circle. The fire and the deceleration and the parachutes and the impact with Pacific water, all of it described in its own precise terror in the engineering documents and the mission reports. But what Artemis II will actually feel like, at its deepest register, is not the launch or the radiation or the re-entry. It is the moment 3 days out when the Earth becomes a marble. When the view from the window stops being the world you know and becomes something else, a thing the universe contains, one of many things, not especially large, not especially protected, hanging in the dark with the particular fragility of everything that lives. And you understand, in a way that no amount of photographs or documentaries or testimony can manufacture in advance, that the universe is genuinely enormous. That the distance between where you are and where the rest of humanity is not a number anymore. It is a feeling. It is the feeling of having gone far enough to understand how far there still is to go. That feeling does not leave you when the capsule splashes down. It does not leave you when the hatch opens and the salt air comes in. It does not leave you when you walk on a planet that you now know, with a certainty that is built into your muscle memory, is a very specific, very finite, very precious point of light in an ocean of darkness that extends in every direction without end. The universe does not change because you went. But you do. And that is what going to the moon will actually feel like.